LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the October 23rd edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I will be using the dozen best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS, and Fox News. Did I say all those right? I think I did. Did I say CBS twice? Anyway, I guess even if you say something 1,000 times, sometimes you don't get it right. No, I think I said it right. But anyway, that's the so-called corporate media here in the United States, and I should be giving a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see from the video title, the main topic this week I'm covering is Republican dysfunction derailing democracy, and I will have clips backing that up, and it's mainly about the Speaker of the House fight, but also about some other problems in the Republican Party. I'll also be covering the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas that was the main topic the last couple weeks, and you'll see is the main topic of all the news summaries. And I'm going to show you all 5 news summaries from the big 5 corporate outlets from longest to shortest. And I do have 2 different political comedy clips for you, both about the Republican dysfunction trying to elect a Speaker of the House. It's been almost 3 weeks now that the House of Representatives has had no Speaker of the House. Everything's paralyzed. The legislative branch can't function. And Saturday Night Live even did a cold open at the beginning of the show on Saturday. I finally have like real professional political comedy because the writers are back, and Saturday Night Live's been back for, is it 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Some of the other late night shows are back, and here is the Speaker of the House race covered with the latest failed speaker, Jim Jordan. I talked a lot about Jim Jordan last week in my final clip that I showed with Nancy Mace. Well, Jim Jordan, Mikey Day, is visited by various people, including the Donald Trump impressionist now on Saturday Night Live, James Austin Johnson. And I don't actually like his impression as much as I like Alec Baldwin's for reason. But there's something about the end part of this clip, and I've edited 2 parts together. It's kind of a long clip. Down under sources, there's a link to the Saturday Night Live YouTube page where you can watch the entire cold open with all the different impressions. But I just wanted to focus in on the Jim Jordan and Donald Trump part, and not even the whole part, but just this one, about 46 seconds. I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
I don't know what else to do. I'm just so close. I only need, 100 votes?
Knock, knock, knock.
Oh.
Yoo-hoo, is this the loser's office?
Mr. President, I'm so glad you're here. But you endorsed me, and I still lost.
Seems to happen a lot. It's happening a lot, but that's okay. You can't give up, all right? You can't give up because this is America. It's the most beautiful country in the world, filled with some terrible people, some awful people, some of the worst people you've ever seen, but we love it. What a beautiful nation it is. What a wonderful nation. Not so much in terms of the people there. People very bad and weird. But don't we love our country? What an awful place it is.
Now, actually, that last part, the writers did a good job there capturing something weird about the Republican Party, in that they like really love America, but they also really hate America, and that's what I liked about the end of that segment. But I was saying before I showed the clip that I like the old Alec Baldwin impression more than the James Austin Johnson one, even though James Austin Johnson, in some ways, like in terms of like the cadence and the voice, and he actually does a much closer impression than Alec Baldwin does, but he doesn't get like the manic clown-like energy. I saw before I started the show in the live comments, I saw Matthew say, wow, SNL is awfully nice getting that guy to play Trump so subdued. A more realistic Trump would have bronzer caked on and be sweating profusely, which is true that it's like almost too nice to Trump to show him with just like this younger impressionist trying to get the voice and the cadence right. But what about the like menacing bluster? What about the, energy that makes him look like his head might explode at any minute? Anyway, that's the what I wanted to talk a little bit about uh, from the Saturday Night Live clip. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good clip. I thought it was funny. And the next, I have a second political comedy clip. I couldn't really believe that Newt Gingrich said this on Fox News Sunday yesterday. And what I found most amusing about it was, and he was giving this long thing about, what they should be, Newt Gingrich used to be Speaker of the House in the 90s. And so he's giving advice to he was like the first Republican Speaker of the House in like 40 years or whatever. And he goes into this long, self-congratulatory thing. And I'm not going to show you all that. But then near the end, he has like this one piece of advice for Republicans that seems like totally sexist. And then the Fox News Sunday host, Shannon Bream, who I'm pretty sure identifies as a woman. I mean, she never says what her pronouns are, but I'm pretty sure she does. But she doesn't push back at all on Newt Gingrich's sexist take that I'll talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
So they need to pick somebody to get stability. I frankly wish that they, and Calista and I have talked about this, I wish they had a woman candidate out of all the candidates they've got running. Somebody like Elise Stefanik or Beth Van Dyne, who had been a mayor of a city before becoming a congressman. I think in some ways, given the level of rowdiness and the level of juvenile behavior, it's conceivable that a female speaker would be more effective in actually getting them all to get together and stick together. That's the key. They have to learn to stick together.
Well, it may get to that point. We've got 7 now.
Do you hear what Shannon? Well, it may get to the point. It may get to that point where they have to choose a woman. Is that what Shannon Bream's only response to Newt Gingrich's claim that because of the boisterous juvenile, like frat boy, locker room men in the House of Representatives, they need a woman? Does he have like mommy issues? Is that when like we need to bring mommy in to tell these boys to play nice or whatever? I don't know, but. Is that what I'm supposed to take from that clip? I don't even know what Newt Gingrich was trying to say there. I mean, it's like one of those weird, nice things that or like nice racist things you say about like a positive racial stereotype. It reminds me like because I'm ethnically Jewish that. People, when I was a public defender, there were certain people who said, "Oh yeah, I want a Jew lawyer," like it, because Jew lawyers are so good or whatever, and it's like a compliment, but it's also anti-Semitic, and I guess Newt Gingrich's compliment of women there is also misogynist. That's the point I'm trying to make. But anyway, I'm now going to move on to the news summaries before I get to my newsmaker clips, which get back to my main topic about the Republican Party dysfunction derailing democracy. But that was not the main topic on any of the 5 news shows. It was actually all coverage of the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict from various different perspectives. The longest one, I have them out of order here. Actually, the longest one is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I have them listed out of right before CBS News' Face the Nation. I thought CBS News, I'll show the CBS News Face the Nation one first anyway, a little bit out of order because I think it was the best one in showing the Palestinian side or like the damage and the death and misery and on both sides. There are a lot of problems. War hurts people on all sides of the conflict in many bad ways, and that's why I have this whole CBS News Face the Nation news summary where they have 2 different reporters, just like last week. including last week, their second reporter had been in Gaza and then was reporting from southern Israel. This time he was in Ramallah on the West Bank, and now is in West Jerusalem. And anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch the news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington. There have been dramatic developments overnight in the Mideast as the Israelis step up air and artillery strikes, now firing missiles into southern Gaza, an area where they'd earlier urged residents to evacuate, as well as the occupied West Bank and 2 airports in Syria. There are still 500 to 600 Americans trapped in Gaza and at least 10 Americans who are unaccounted for and potentially hostages of Hamas. Plus, there are clashes at Israel's northern border with Lebanon, home to the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah. Overnight, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin deployed additional air defense systems in response to recent attacks on U.S. troops in the region. We have a lot to get to today, but we begin in Israel with Charlie D'Agata.
The full force of Israeli airstrikes and artillery resumed overnight and this morning. And a rare airstrike in the West Bank on a suspected Hamas terror cell in Jenin. 2 weeks of heavy bombardment has left Gaza in ruins, with a death toll that surpassed 4,300 people, another 13,000 injured. There had been a brief lull with the release of American hostages Judith Ronan and her daughter Natalie from Chicago, the first and only hostages to emerge from captivity. Rescuing the rest in the middle of an expected full-scale invasion presents an unprecedented challenge, the former head of an Israeli Special Forces unit told us.
This is the responsibility of the state to 200 hostages, infants, wounded. There's no way the country can move without taking this into consideration. This would be an element in the handling of the war.
A war Israeli forces are readying more than 350,000 reservists for. What we've witnessed is a steady buildup of hundreds of thousands of Israeli troops and heavy equipment like this in staging areas, all pointed in one direction about a mile from Gaza. The stated aim of the complete destruction of Hamas means an invasion on a scale never seen here before. Former Major General Israel Ziv once commanded Israeli forces in Gaza.
We're completely changing the tactics. We're going to use a lot of fire. We don't want to play to their hands, to their traps, to whatever they prepare for us.
This morning, the Israeli spokesman said that strike on a suspected terror cell in Jenin eliminated what he called a ticking bomb, while the wave of attacks overnight in Gaza City resulted in the deaths of dozens of Hamas militants.
That's Charlie D'Agata reporting from Tel Aviv. Imtiaz Tyab spent time in Ramallah over the weekend, and he is back in West Jerusalem.
Well, across the Middle East and around the world, we've seen massive demonstrations in solidarity with Palestinians. In London, over 100,000 people took to the streets of the British capital demanding an end to Israel's war in Gaza. There's also been similar scenes in Arab capitals, from Sana'a in war-torn Yemen to Cairo, where the Egyptian president Abdel Fattah al-Sisi called for a, quote, day of rage just hours after his phone call with President Biden earlier this week. It was a phone call in which a deal was reached between Egypt, the U.S., and Israel to allow 20 trucks of desperately needed humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, which started arriving only yesterday. On the Israeli-occupied West Bank, the violence there is only getting worse. We were at one protest where we witnessed Israeli snipers shoot at least 3 Palestinians. Now, earlier, we spoke with Mustafa Barghouti, the president of the Palestinian National Initiative and a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council since 2006.
I'm shattered. I'm angry, mainly because I don't understand why this all should happen. But what breaks my heart so much is the suffering of civilians, whether Palestinian or Israeli. And what I don't understand, why the President of the United States comes here and instead of telling Israel enough is enough, you wanted to respond, you responded, you already killed 4,000 Palestinians, stop. Instead of that, he's encouraging them to have an invasion, a ground invasion.
So you think President Biden's visit was a catastrophic mistake?
Catastrophic from three aspects. First, it was a huge political and diplomatic failure, as I told you, because nobody wanted to meet with him except Israelis. Second, it's a strategic mistake because he's dragging the United States into a very dangerous area where war crimes are committed. And third, because he is consolidating the absence of peace process.
Do you see a scenario where this ends?
Yes, one scenario. There is no other scenario. Immediate change of the behavior of Western leaders who are now participating in encouraging Netanyahu to commit these war crimes. And the United States is the only country that has the real leverage over Israel. And they should tell Israel, stop. Stop, enough. Let's have ceasefire. Let's have immediate exchange of prisoners so that all Israeli prisoners would come back home safe. And let's initiate a true peace process to solve the roots of the problem, which is occupation and the system of apartheid.
Now, efforts to create a Palestinian state have been at a standstill for years now, largely because Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's successive hard-right governments have been firmly opposed to it. And while the Biden administration continues to back calls for a peace process that would lead to a two-state solution, it's done very little practically and diplomatically to advance that goal. And after Hamas's brutal attack and a looming Israeli ground war in Gaza, it's a goal that seems even further away than ever.
We go now to Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
And I won't have any Antony Blinken clips because, like I said, I'm covering the Republican Speaker of the House race and some other dysfunction in the Republican Party when I get to the newsmaker clips, but I always show these news summaries, and I thought the CBS News Face the Nation there gave like quite a bit of room for the perspective of Palestinians and the context of what they want and what they're not getting, and the Netanyahu government refusing to really pursue the two-state solution is one of the reasons we got to where we are, and that's important information, especially given that the U.S. media generally has quite a pro-Israeli tilt, as we've seen in the clips the last couple weeks. I thought ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos also had a little bit of that pro-Israeli tilt, but did a good job of trying to bring in some of the Palestinian perspective for American viewers. And this is the longest news summary. It's only Jon Karl and then their reporter Ian Pannell, but he takes in a lot of different, even though he's in Tel Aviv, he does get some stuff from Gaza and from around, well, I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that second news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. It has been 15 days since Hamas militants launched their unspeakably cruel early morning terror attack from the Gaza Strip, ruthlessly and indiscriminately striking from the air and the ground, murdering, torturing, and kidnapping civilians, from the very young to the very old. Crimes against humanity that Israel says have now claimed the lives of more than 1,400 Israelis. As Israel strikes back against an enemy that hides behind the innocent and the vulnerable, the toll of horror and suffering on both sides of the Gaza border continues to rise as the region and the world faces troubling questions about what comes next. What does Israel do after its clearly telegraphed ground invasion? What will become of the more than 200 hostages believed to be held by Hamas? What will happen to the more than 2 million Palestinians facing both war and starvation? The death toll now above 4,600, according to the Hamas-run Palestinian Ministry of Health. And what can and should the United States do to protect Israel and to prevent a further humanitarian crisis in Gaza? With U.S. forces gathering in the region, what happens if this becomes a wider regional war? We'll cover it all this morning. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is standing by. We begin with ABC Chief Foreign Correspondent Ian Pannell in Tel Aviv with the very latest. Good morning, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, John. You know, this region was already at boiling point before the October 7th massacre by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Israeli and American leaders touted this new Middle East order with normalized relations between Israel and Arab country, but now it's all at risk of unraveling. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is center stage again, and America risks being drawn into a wider war.
This was the week Israel's war with Hamas began to spread amid fears of a wider war. On the ground, after days of difficult negotiations, the border into Gaza from Egypt finally opened for desperately needed medical and food supplies, but just a small fraction of what aid agencies say they need.
What is needed is a continuous flow of aid. This is not about a one-off, sending 20 trucks and then nothing.
The relief comes amid a worsening crisis in Gaza. People now on their 12th day without electricity. Israel imposing a complete siege, cutting off food, medicine, fuel, and only limited water.
Don't sell it to the people that this is the war against Hamas. Everybody being the price in Gaza.
This small strip of land has been bombarded every day and night for more than 2 straight weeks. Retaliation for the massacre of 1,400 people in Israel on October 7th. But it's left over 4,600 Palestinians dead. On Friday, Hamas freeing 2 American hostages, Judith Renan and her daughter, 17-year-old Natalie. A gesture to America that Hamas might hope could pressure Israel to pause or modify its plans for a ground invasion. But Israel seems determined to press ahead, even though more than 200 hostages, including Americans, are still being held inside Gaza. Defense Minister Gallant telling troops they'll soon see the Gaza Strip, quote, from the inside. Tensions erupted around this region and elsewhere after a deadly hospital explosion in Gaza that left hundreds dead, according to Palestinian health officials. Both sides blaming each other for the attack. Protests erupted near the Israeli embassy in Amman, the U.S. embassy in Beirut, mobbed, and across the region, people took to the streets to denounce Israel and America, amid worrying signs of escalation. U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria came under attack from Iranian-backed militias, while a U.S. Navy destroyer shot down 3 cruise missiles and several drones fired by Iranian-backed Yemeni Houthi rebels. It was the first shots fired by America in this war.
They were launched from Yemen, heading north along the Red Sea, potentially towards targets in Israel.
With escalating attacks across the border from Lebanon to Israel's north by Hezbollah, another Iranian-backed militant group, and Iran's rhetoric increasingly threatening, the U.S. warning all Americans traveling abroad to be vigilant and beefing up its forces in the region. Overnight, Defense Secretary Austin deploying another carrier strike group to the region, additional air defenses, and putting more troops on standby. The decision made because of what he calls escalations by Iran and its proxy forces across the Middle East region. President Biden made a high-risk and high-stakes wartime visit to Israel this week. He came here with a message of sympathy and solidarity.
Israel, you're not alone. The United States stands with you.
But the president also urging moderation, warning Israel not to be consumed by its anger. Arab leaders cancelled an important summit with Biden, frustrating his plans to ameliorate the growing anger in the Middle East, not just at Israel, but at what's seen as American support for a military campaign that's left Gaza awash in blood. Biden now requesting a $100 billion foreign aid package, including $14 billion for Israel, warning Americans in an address to the nation a day later that the world is at an inflection point.
History has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death.
This morning, Israel urging more residents to leave their homes in the north amid increased fighting on the border with Lebanon. And near Barakat, Israel's Minister of the Economy telling Britain's Mail on Sunday newspaper today that, quote, Iran's ayatollahs will be wiped off the face of the earth should Hezbollah, their proxy terror group in Lebanon, attack Israel. John, the region's never felt so dangerous and closer to a wider war in decades.
And Ian, beyond the military action, we're also seeing rising anger throughout the Arab world. How significant and dangerous is that?
Yeah, we are. And of course, a lot of this has been brought out into the open by the conflict that we're seeing here, in particular the Israeli bombing inside Gaza and the West Bank. But it's about much more. There is a lot of latent anger, on the Arab street in countries like Jordan and Egypt. President Sisi of Egypt wanted people to come out and protest about the bombing that's taking place in Gaza. But interestingly, as well as people shouting slogans against Israel and America, they also revitalized some of those revolutionary slogans that we saw in Tahrir Square back in 2011, calling for dignity and bread and progress. And this is very dangerous for Arab regimes around the region, for some of our closest allies, and they know it's not just about potential for a wider war, it's potential for internal conflict that could unseat some of America's closest allies. John?
All right, thank you, Ian. Joining us now is Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin.
And I don't have a clip of Lloyd Austin because that's not my main topic, but I thought that was also a good news summary and gave a lot of context, especially about the possibility for a wider war. Both of the last two clips in their news summaries, they mentioned the number of reported Palestinian deaths, like around 4,300, 4,600, somewhere in like the mid 4,000s, which is like triple the October 7th targeted civilian attack on Israel. And at least the last two reports gave you those numbers briefly there, and they did show a lot of the harm being done to all the peoples involved in the conflict. The thing I liked but thought could have gone a little farther there at the end from Ian Pannell, where he talked about the so-called Arab Street, which, all of these Middle Eastern regimes are not really democracies. Egypt has a strongman dictator. Jordan has a king. Saudi Arabia has a king and crown prince, and a lot of these regimes are not responsive to their people, although that doesn't necessarily mean their people are more liberal than they are on issues necessarily. But I liked how Ian Pannell reported on how some of the demonstrations on the Arab street around the Arab world were actually also protesting against the regimes themselves in some ways. And that's one of the reasons that these regimes like to focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and get their people to focus away from their own oppression, because a lot of these governments are really oppressive. And Ian Pannell kind of alluded to that, but I think maybe he could have done a little more to bring that out, especially in terms of, he talked about them being like America's allies might be unseated. Well, that's because America is supporting a lot of oppressive regimes all over the Middle East. And anyway, I wanted to point that out from that news summary and then move on to the CNN State of the Union news summary with Jake Tapper and then their reporter Matthew Chance, who's up in Kiryat Shmona, which is kind of weird. It means the same thing you're going to hear from Kevin McCarthy in the speaker race. It means Gang of Eight, or I think Kevin McCarthy refers to like Matt Gaetz and the Crazy Eight or whatever, the people who deposed him. But Kiryat Shmona is named after 8 Israeli war heroes. I don't remember the story exactly, but that's the Gang of 8. And it's right on the Lebanese border. And so Matthew Chance actually talks a lot more about Hezbollah and Lebanon and the threat of a northern front to this war for Israel, which was also discussed in the last two news summaries. But I think Matthew Chance does a little bit better on that particular aspect over in this clip.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is grieving so much pain and loss of life. This morning, the Israeli military says it is stepping up its airstrikes against Hamas in Gaza. The IDF also hit a mosque in the West Bank to prevent what it called an imminent terror attack. All as we learned more unimaginable details about the brutality of the Hamas terrorist attack on Israeli civilians on October 7th. Now, with anticipation of a ground war building, the human devastation in Gaza is coming into clearer focus. Disturbing new video just into CNN shows a hospital in the central Gaza district overwhelmed with bodies following overnight airstrikes. Just now, more aid trucks are beginning to be allowed to enter Gaza through Egypt's Rafah crossing, although it's not clear how many or what they were carrying. The first aid trucks were just let through yesterday as the UN warns civilian lives in Gaza are being pushed, quote, to the edge of catastrophe. And as anger at Israel and its supporters in the West grow throughout the Middle East, there are new signs of concern about this escalation growing into a regional war. The U.S. military is deploying additional missile defense systems to the Middle East, quote, in response to escalations throughout the region. Secretary of State Antony Blinken held a call with his Qatari counterpart last night to discuss further efforts to get American hostages released after 2 American hostages were released by Hamas and are making their way home. What Hamas got in exchange for those 2 hostages has not been disclosed. Joining me now from northern Israel is CNN's Matthew Chance. Matthew, when it comes to fears of this war spreading to becoming a larger regional conflict, Israel says it is evacuating even more communities near where you are.
That's right. I'm in the northern town of Kiryat Shmona, which has already been evacuated. The authorities sending buses to get those out who couldn't get out by their own vehicles. And towns and villages all across this very volatile region in the north of Israel, close to the Lebanese and close to the Syrian border as well, they've all been cleared out. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, both here and in communities in the south of Israel as well, who have evacuated because of the attacks last week in Gaza, who have now been displaced because of this ongoing violence in the country. The situation here in the north is particularly of concern because the Israeli military say there's been an upsurge in attacks by Hezbollah forces across the border over the course of the past several days, drones being flown above Kiryat Shmona, rocket strikes, anti-tank weapons being fired at the border fence, infiltrations of militant fighters that have been repulsed as well. All of this, the Israeli military say they've responded to. They've been carrying out an increased number of attacks inside southern Lebanon, but they have warned Lebanon as well and Hezbollah as well that it will press further, that it will launch, enormous strikes on Hezbollah and indeed on Lebanon if that escalation continues. One IDF spokesperson saying that Hezbollah is playing a dangerous game and dragging Lebanon into a war that it will lose. And so, yeah, look, there's a lot of concern about what Lebanon is doing, about what Hezbollah in Lebanon is doing, but an absolute kind of commitment, it seems, from the Israelis to strike back hard if that escalation continues, Jake.
We've seen Israeli troops and tanks building up on the border with Gaza. Do we know anything about any sort of timeline for an Israeli ground incursion into Gaza?
No, I wish we did, but obviously we're all very nervous and tense watching when that move will be made across that frontier into Gaza. Already the Israelis say that they've been stepping up airstrikes and they intend to do that to put more pressure on Hamas. The objective remains the same, of course, they say, which is to, in their words, destroy Hamas and dismantle its military infrastructure. But in terms of when the actual green light for a land invasion is going to be put on, or not, we don't know yet. I mean, there is a possibility, although this isn't an official position at this point, there is a possibility that Israel may be waiting to see what further results the talks between the United States and Qatar and Hamas may yield in terms of more hostage negotiations and more hostage releases. Already 2 US citizens held by Hamas, of course, in the past 24 hours have been released. Obviously, there's a hope that more their freedom can be brokered as well. But that's not the official Israeli position. They're saying they will choose the exact time and the exact moment when it's best suited for a military incursion for them to green light it. Jake.
All right, Matthew Chance, thank you so much. Joining me now for her first media interview in more than a year, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney.
And I will have 2 clips of Liz Cheney at the end, both of which she does not get well cross-examined by either Jake Tapper or CBS News Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan, because they ask her about this question, what lessons should we have learned from 9/11 so that Israel doesn't overreact to Israel's 9/11? Remember, a couple weeks ago, I showed that clip of one person from Israel talking about how this was worse, 49 9/11s if you proportionally look at the number of people killed compared to the Israeli population. And, we wouldn't have been questioning you. How would Americans have felt if we'd questioned your response to 9/11? And I was saying 2 weeks ago, actually, it might have been good if someone had questioned the U.S. response to 9/11 a little more carefully, because we overreacted. We ended up with a 20-year war in Afghanistan. And of course, the invasion of Iraq, which was like a country that wasn't even involved, and that created all sorts of problems. I mean, of all the bad things Donald Trump did, one of the good things he did when he ran for president in 2016 is he like opened up a whole part of the Republican Party who now says George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq and response to 9/11 was a big problem, like got us involved in all these stupid wars in the Middle East that cost us all this money, I think Trump said. Or, I mean, like, finally people on the Republican side are criticizing it. And, you know, a lot of Democrats like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq War. So, though there's always been a large faction of the Democratic Party who opposed George W. Bush's overreaction to 9/11. And we have a woman here in California, Barbara Lee, running for Senate. She in the House of Representatives, the only one to vote against the authorization for use of force right after 9/11 that they're still using and was way too expansive. So I'm going to be talking about that in terms of how even the good people in the Republican Party, like Liz Cheney, who a lot of people gave a lot of praise to after her role on the January 6th committee hearings, but I think every time I was showing those clips back when that was happening, I said, but remember, there are a lot of evil things about Liz Cheney, and I'll be showing those evil things in those last two Liz Cheney clips. But I have to finish these news summaries that are on, I guess that's kind of on this topic, though I'm using it to show like how all the sides of the Republican Party are terrible. You know, even the non-election deniers like Liz Cheney have some pretty evil views about the use of the U.S. military around the world to get things that we want, even if they're not good for us or the world. But anyway, I've gone off on a big Liz Cheney tangent so that you can prepare yourselves for clip 11 and clip 12. But now we have to finish up the news summaries. Of course, this is from Fox News Sunday, so it is the most pro-Israel of all of them. You noticed in the CNN State of the Union news summary there, Jake Tapper mentioned that there was a mosque bombed on the West Bank, but that Israel said it was to stop a terror cell or whatever. They don't mention on Fox News Sunday that it was a mosque. That's how pro-Israel, I mean, couldn't get more pro-Israel, I don't think, than, well, we'll see. I'll watch it again with you and see, is there anything that's not like total pro-Israel spin in the Fox News Sunday clip? Let's see.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. It has been more than 2 weeks since Hamas's shocking attack on Israel. The Israeli Defense Force continues to amass troops in the south ahead of an anticipated ground invasion of Gaza. A bit of good news this week. Hamas released 2 American hostages, and international humanitarian aid has begun to flow into Gaza through a passage in Egypt. These are live pictures from the Rafah boarding crossing from Egypt into Gaza. But clashes and exchange of fire to the north between Israel and Hezbollah militants across the Lebanon border has many concerned about a two-front conflict. We begin with Trey Yingst, live in southern Israel with the latest on the ground. Hello, Trey.
Shannon, good morning. Anticipation is growing ahead of Israel's looming ground offensive into the Gaza Strip. The Israelis say they are increasing airstrikes across the enclave in preparation for what is expected to be months of fighting. Israel's 16-day air campaign against Gaza has destroyed infrastructure and killed more than 4,600 Gazans, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Inside Israel, the death toll stands at more than 1,400 people following that brutal massacre on October 7th. Now, Fox News spoke with the Golani brigades in the southern part of this country to talk about how they are preparing for battle.
I have to protect my people, the people I love, and I know that this Hamas can danger them after what they did here, after what they did to citizens, to innocent citizens that did nothing to them.
Despite Israeli efforts, factions inside Gaza have maintained the ability to fire on southern and central Israel, targeting central Israel with rockets and mortars here near to the border. Take a look. 13 Palestinians were killed. We need to go because there could be mortar fire here. Just stay with me. Get in. That's mortar. Get in, get cover, everyone in. Listen to our camera. So what you heard there, the whistle of incoming mortar fire. So those were indeed mortars that were fired at this position, and we are so close to the Gaza border. You have about 10 seconds to get to cover. Overnight, Israel conducted a rare airstrike against Palestinians in the West Bank, another indication this war is expanding to new fronts. Shannon?
Yeah, and Trey, I know there's a worry that it would expand to the northern front. What can you tell us about what's going on with Hezbollah and the Lebanon area?
The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah has continued to fire rockets and small arms into northern Israel, today launching anti-tank guided missiles into the country. The Israelis have started to respond immediately to that fire with both airstrikes and artillery units along the border. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with troops today, saying to Hezbollah, if they go to war with Israel, it would bring unimaginable damage to the group and Lebanon. Shannon?
All right, Trey Yingst reporting around the clock for us from Israel. Thank you so much, Trey. Joining us now, retired four-star general and Fox News senior strategic analyst, Jack Keane. General, great.
I don't have a clip of Jack Keane, but I watched it again. I think it was totally pro-Israel spin. They reported the number of Israeli casualties from October 7th. I didn't hear any Palestinian casualties. I heard a long interview with, the brave Israeli troops about to take on Hamas and the threat of Hezbollah from the northern border. It was pretty much all pro-Israeli spin, especially compared to all three of the previous news summaries and also the NBC News Meet the Press news summary. It's the shortest one. It's just Kristen Welker without giving it to a reporter. There's no Richard Engel this week. I don't know why they decided to do that. I remember Chuck Todd always used to have the biggest, longest package, and now Kristen Welker, it's just not the same. Here's the final, shortest news summary, though, that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. The U.S. is stepping up its military readiness across the Mideast, citing escalations by Iran and its proxy forces as the U.S. and Israel prepare for a widening war. American-Israeli hostages Judith and Natalie Raanan spoke to President Biden on Saturday after being released by Hamas. They were abducted in the terror attack 2 weeks ago in southern Israel.
Hey, Judith.
Hello, President.
I'm so glad you're home. Or not home, I'm glad you're out.
Thank you so very, very much.
Hey, Nat, how are you? God love you.
I just want to say thank you for your services for Israel.
Now, according to the Israeli military, 212 hostages are still being held captive, at least 30 of them under the age of 16. The first 20 trucks carrying aid moved through the Rafah border crossing from Egypt into Gaza on Saturday, but did not include fuel critical to keeping hospitals running and to providing clean water. And there's the threat of a widening war. President Biden and his top aides have been urging Israeli leaders against carrying out any major strike against Hezbollah in Lebanon, which could draw Israel into a two-front war. And there's the growing threat from Iran. On Wednesday, at least 2 drones targeted a U.S. garrison in southern Syria, injuring several U.S. personnel. Drones and rockets also targeted bases with U.S. troops in Iraq this week, resulting in several more minor injuries. Thursday, a U.S. Navy ship in the northern Red Sea downed 4 cruise missiles, and more than a dozen drones launched from Yemen by pro-Iranian Houthi forces that seem to be heading towards Israel. Overnight, the Pentagon announced the U.S. is sending additional missile defense systems to the region, moving a carrier strike group to the Persian Gulf, and putting additional U.S. troops on prepare to deploy orders. President Biden is linking a request for aid to Israel to Ukraine, formally asking Congress for $105 billion in emergency funding. On Thursday night, the president pressed for American engagement at a time of growing global instability.
History has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death and more destruction. They keep going, and the cost and the threats to America and the world keep rising.
And joining me now is Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who recently returned.
Okay, but I don't have Antony Blinken because that is it with that topic. I'll talk about it a little bit more when I get to the Liz Cheney clips maybe, but that's all the news summaries. I don't know why NBC didn't have a reporter. I did like the little animated map there at the end, especially the cruise missiles from Yemen that were apparently on their way to Israel, though I heard uh, someone from that ship interviewed saying that they actually shot those cruise missiles down from Yemen because they were a threat to the ship itself. But anyway, that's the last of the news summaries, and you can tell me which one you think was best. Definitely the worst one was Fox News Sunday, and maybe NBC News Meet the Press after that. And then the other three were all good in their own ways, but I think CBS News Face the Nation really uh, gave the best context, and especially giving voice to the Palestinians that you don't see a lot on U.S. media. So I wanted to finish up the news summaries and get to my main topic of Republican dysfunction derailing democracy. Now, derailing democracy, is that an overstatement? Well, I actually took that title kind of from this next clip, which is only about a minute long. It's Republican Representative Mike McCall from Texas, I believe, over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking to Jon Karl about the dysfunction, the inability of Republicans to elect a speaker, and his embarrassment about that, and especially what will she think? What will what will China? What are they thinking about it, and what are they thinking? Democracy derailed, as you can see over in this clip.
Of course, I guess you need a Speaker of the House before you get any of this done. What
what
the hell's going on?
I have to say, and it's my 10th term in Congress.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the most embarrassing things I've seen, because if we don't have a Speaker of the House, we can't govern. And every day goes by, we're essentially shut down as a government. We have very important issues right now, war and peace, and we cannot deal with an aid package or my resolution condemning Hamas and supporting Israel. We can't.
You can't even pass a resolution condemning Hamas.
Because
are you supporting? I've lost count now. I think we're pushing a dozen candidates and potential candidates for Speaker. who are you supporting?
I haven't decided, but I want a Speaker in the chair so we can move forward and govern. My issues, my Committee of War and Peace, it's too dangerous right now. The world's on fire, and this is so dangerous what we're doing. And most importantly, it's embarrassing because it empowers and emboldens our adversaries like Chairman Xi, who says, democracy doesn't work.
Is there any possibility of, I don't want
so there you go. There's a Republican claiming that the Republicans in the House of Representatives are giving support to Chairman Xi of China by giving him a talking point showing that democracy doesn't work. I also forgot to say I really like Jon Karl's opening question there, like, what the hell is going on? In this situation, that I believe is like a reasonable question. And it's not just Mike McCall who's embarrassed. Mitch McConnell was on two different Sunday morning news programs yesterday. And that's like a big step for him because he's he like fell and went to the hospital, and then he had a couple of these episodes where he like froze and said, he was like in the middle of talking on camera and like froze for 20 or 30 seconds and then had to be like taken away and anyway, so I guess he's all better because he's trying to show that he's healthy, and so I wanted to include 30 seconds of him. Of course, this is from Fox News Sunday, so they never even asked him about the Republican dysfunction till like 10 minutes into the interview, in the last minute, and there's only 30 seconds of him talking about the House. And the way Shannon Bream phrased the question is so biased. But I believe it was, let me look at my notes here. It was... she asked him, does he have any advice for Republican issues over on the House side? Because he had just finished talking about the Democrats' issues with Bob Menendez, the New Jersey senator who's been indicted for corruption. And so here's her follow-up question.
Well, you've got some Republican issues over on the House side. Any advice for those folks over there as they try to figure this out?
I hope they can get a speaker sometime soon, because it does send, I think, a poor message to our allies and our enemies around the world. And we also have work to do. We have appropriation bills to pass. We have a supplemental to deal with. So I'm pulling for them to finally wrap this up sometime soon.
Leader, we thank you for your time.
So yeah, that was it. Right at the end of the interview, a total softball question from Fox News, but Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell pretty much backs up what Representative Mike McCall said in the previous clip. It embarrasses us to our adversaries. It's Republican dysfunction derailing democracy. So that's why it's the title of my video. If you want to see someone try to blame it on the Democrats and not get a really good cross-examination on it, it's Representative Kevin McCarthy, former Speaker of the House, deposed Speaker of the House, failed Speaker of the House. I guess Kevin McCarthy was on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker. I didn't think she did a great cross-examination here, but here you can see him weave together his whole theory of how it's, the Democrats joining with the Crazy Eight, the gang, or Matt Gaetz and the Crazy Eight, or the Gang of Eight, the Kiryat Shmona, as it were. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Welcome back. With no Speaker of the House for more than 18 days, a government shutdown looming, and an aid package for Israel stalled, Republican divisions have broken out into the open in angry reclamations and even death threats. On Friday, House Republicans dropped hard-right Republican Congressman Jim Jordan as their candidate for Speaker after he failed for the third time to get the necessary votes, leaving Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries as the candidate with the most votes, but short of a majority. Nearly 10 House Republicans are now exploring bids for Speaker. Joining me now is the man whose name is still on the sign above the Speaker's office, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Mr. Speaker, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for being here. Look, as we have said, the House of Representatives has been without a speaker for nearly 3 weeks now. What do you say to Americans who look at this chaos and believe it's a sign that Republicans cannot govern?
Well, it's embarrassing, and you've got to understand why we are here. 8 Republicans, led by Gaetz, have created this chaos by joining every single Democrat in voting to shut down one branch of government. Look, I would do the exact same thing again. Could you imagine if we were having this discussion right now with the American government shut down, with our troops in the Middle East, wondering when they'll ever get paid again? Keeping the government open was the right decision to make, and I'd make it again each and every day. Now, the 2 men, Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan, they could have done the job as Speaker. Unfortunately, the chaos has continued. We need to solve this problem. We got a wide open southern border. We got crushing inflation. We got war in the Middle East. This is not a moment in time to play around with learning on the job. We need someone who understands how to do this job. I believe Tom Emmer, our whip, he's been in the room with all of our successes, from our bills to secure the border, from Parents' Bill of Rights, from cutting $2 trillion, getting work requirements. He knows how to do the job across the street at the same time, helping us win the majority. He sets himself head and shoulders above all those others who want to run. We need to get him elected this week and move on and bring this not just party together, but focus on what this country needs most.
We're going to delve into Tom Emmer in just a moment. But first, I want to ask you, I hear you invoking Democrats. I understand why. The reality, though, is, as you know, Republicans control the House. Does this not come down to Matt Gaetz ultimately moving to oust you? And therefore, do you bear some responsibility for this, Mr. Speaker, for agreeing to give him the deal in the first place to be able to remove you with just 1 vote?
Well, that deal has been with every speaker in the House. The only person who had changed it is Nancy Pelosi. But no other party. I had the power to make this motion against Nancy Pelosi, but I never did because I believed in the institution of the House. All the other Democrat leaders believed they never should be able to raise this issue. Remember, as we go forward in the next decade, if the majority changes, no one's going to have a big majority.
So what Hakeem Jeffries has just done, changed the institution itself to say it's okay to always make a motion to try to shut down one branch of government.
But Mr. Speaker, just to be clear,
what Matt Gaetz has done here, think about this. He has chosen with no plan, concerned about an ethics complaint that was registered against him in the last Congress, to try to go and move and shut it down. This is a wrong approach. It's brought chaos. The Democrats went along with it, and they have blame too. But I would sit back. I'll take whatever blame needed. But if the blame is on me for keeping government open and voting for the troops, I would do that again tomorrow.
but just very quickly, just to put a fine point on it, before we get to Tom Emmer, do you regret giving Matt Gaetz that power over you?
You don't have that choice. You have 218 votes to pass a rule. No Democrat would vote. They all voted just like they did to shut this, to throw me out. They all voted against that rule as well. So they wouldn't help at that time. So I believed moving forward is the best, like every other speaker has had.
Let's talk about Tom Emmer.
Yeah, and so that was the only follow-up there on this whole Kevin McCarthy theory that Democrats are responsible for him losing his speakership. Like the Democrats are supposed to vote for the Republican speaker or vote to keep the Republican speaker on a motion to vacate that. And you saw Kristen Welker did some good follow-up questioning there about his responsibility by letting one member of the House caucus make this motion to vacate that ended up ending his speakership. But she said she understands his blaming it on Democrats. And he said Hakeem Jeffries changed the way the House is because he went along with the motion to vacate. But that's really ridiculous, that talking point there where it was like 8 Republicans joined with all the Democrats. Well, that's not true, because if 8 Republicans had joined with all the Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries would be speaker. But they didn't vote with the Democrats for speaker. They voted for other people. If the 8 Republicans had really joined with the Democrats, then there'd be a Democratic governing majority and a Democratic speaker. And I was kind of disappointed that Kristen Welker didn't do a better job of following up on that, and even said, I understand. I don't know what that's supposed. I understand why you're blaming Democrats. Well, because what else are you going to do? You're a Republican, so you're going to blame Democrats no matter what? Maybe if she'd explicated it a little more and that's what she meant, then I might accept it. But anyway, I have 2 more clips here, and these clips are still part of my Republican dysfunction derailing democracy, because I wanted to show that even the good Republicans are bad. Even even Mitt Romney wants to cut taxes for millionaires and billionaires and cut social programs for the poor and the middle class. And even Liz Cheney is a con or neocon, or I don't know, militaristic unitary executive, daughter of Dick Cheney, who we used to see as like Darth Vader and a big threat to peace and social justice, I guess. But he once famously went on Meet the Press before the invasion of Iraq and said, we don't want the smoking gun to become a mushroom cloud. And they said they're like on the verge of a nuclear bomb. And then he had to like walk it back. And there's so many problems with what the Dick Cheney, as part of the George W. Bush administration, did in response to 9/11. And as I was saying earlier, when I first talked about these upcoming Liz Cheney clips, the one thing good that Donald Trump did was he opened up a wing of the Republican Party that actually repudiates the wars in the Middle East that happened after 9/11. But I guess Liz Cheney, that's one of the reasons she was rejected Donald Trump, is because he just wouldn't accept the forever war that followed 9/11 that the Dick Cheney was such a big part of creating. And So that was something she was asked about both on CBS News' Face the Nation and CNN State of the Union. And her answer is incredible. At one point in both of these answers, you'll hear her say, well, the biggest mistake the U.S. made after 9/11 was Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. And then in the other one, or I think in the first one here, she also blames the Trump-Biden withdrawal from Afghanistan was the biggest mistake made after 9/11, not like invading Iraq based on weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. Like, and neither of these anchors like makes that immediate follow-up. Like, wait, you mean not invading Iraq for WMDs that didn't exist? No. There's like really no follow-up to that incredible claim from Liz Cheney in either of the next two clips. And so I'm going to criticize. They're both about 3.5 minutes long. First, here's Liz Cheney with Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation, trying to make this incredible bogus point over here.
Well, we've been talking about what's happening in the Middle East right now. I know you watch the region closely. President Biden counseled Netanyahu during his trip to Israel last week and repeated a certain phrase I want to play for you here in his Oval Office address.
But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes.
And that was a nod to 9/11 and the U.S. Invasion of Iraq, potentially an overreach. Do you agree with that warning President Biden is issuing there, that there is the risk here of Israel taking actions that could backfire on their own security?
I think that our support and defense of Israel needs to be unwavering. I think that for the most part, that's what President Biden has demonstrated. I thought that most of the themes that he laid out in his Oval Office address were exactly right about the importance of American leadership, the importance of understanding this is a battle between the forces of freedom and the forces of tyranny and terrorism. With respect to his comments about 9/11 and post 9/11, I would say the fact that we had not a single additional terrorist attack, mass casualty terrorist attack in over 20 years now demonstrates that the steps that we took were in fact effective. And I would say the biggest mistake, frankly, post 9/11 was the hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan that President Trump started, President Biden completed. So I think we need to set our differences about those issues aside. We certainly do have them. But with respect to what's happening in the world today, I think it's crucially important for the world to see that the United States, we are united across party lines in the defense of Israel and in the importance of the destroying Hamas, and also a very strong warning that the president has issued to Iran. Yeah. And that, frankly, the Biden administration policy needs to be changed to make it consistent with the kind of warning that we've seen.
But in terms of that comment about reacting from a place of rage and unintended consequences, Secretary Blinken said the only way to defeat an ideology is by offering a better alternative. What is the better alternative for a conflict that has been going on for this many decades?
There is no notion in which this is a battle of ideologies when you look at what Hamas did. And I think that the world has moved on far too quickly from what Hamas did. Hamas slaughtered innocents. They invaded Israel and they slaughtered women and children and tortured people and raped people. And the fact that the world has moved on from that now, that is an ideology, if it even is one, of evil. And so the way to battle that is making sure that you destroy Hamas, making sure that we send a very clear message to Iran, that Iran will face severe consequences if it tries to get involved here. We also, though, need to recognize the rising anti-Semitism and the expressions of anti-Semitism that we have seen across our country and across the world since October 7th must be absolutely rejected, and the world must stand against that. So this is not a moral equivalence. This is not a peace process question. This was out and out slaughter, and we absolutely stand against that.
And CBS continues to tell those stories. So just to be clear, the journalists have not moved on. When will you make a decision about whether you want to run?
And then you see Margaret Brennan moves on to asking about running for president and responds to what Liz Cheney said about the American media isn't spending enough time talking about all the Israelis who died on the October 7th attack. And Margaret Brennan says, no, we're still telling those stories. And that's definitely true. You heard all of that in the news summaries. And that was instead of any follow-up to that incredible claim about like the worst mistake was the withdrawal. The worst mistake the U.S. made after 9/11 was 20 years later, Trump and then Trump started and Biden finished the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that deserves some follow-up. And I was very disappointed it wasn't there, and it also wasn't in this next clip where Liz Cheney makes the same claim, although I think she just blames Biden in this next clip. Jake Tapper doesn't follow up, and he does the same thing that Margaret Brennan did. Like, he follows up on her claim that the U.S. media isn't spending enough time reporting on what happened to Israelis on October 7th, and you'll hear him say, oh no, we're still covering those stories. No follow-up on the worst mistake being the worst U.S. mistake after 9/11 being the withdrawal from Afghanistan. No follow-up on that. And for Jake Tapper, it's even more egregious because he ended the CNN State of the Union program with a whole little segment about like the mistakes the United States made after 9/11. Here, I'll put a link in the live comments there to that video, Will the Lessons of U.S. Response to 9/11 Guide Israel? And he talks especially about like, killing civilians actually creates more terrorists than it kills, or than it stops. Even if you're not targeting civilians, if you have a lot of civilian collateral damage, if you're like drone striking weddings or whatever, you're going to create more terrorists than you actually prevent or whatever. So I'm surprised that Jake Tapper didn't do a better job, but here you can see him talking to Liz Cheney and doing just as bad a job as Margaret Brennan did in that last clip. And this is the final clip, and I'll end the program after this, after I make a few brief final comments after the clip.
Sure, but let me ask you, just in terms of advising a country that is an ally, a lot of people are drawing parallels to 9/11, although proportionally this was worse. This would be the same as killing 40,000 people in Israel as opposed to 3,000 as happened here in 9/11. On 9/11, your father was vice president. You came to work at the State Department after 9/11. Take a listen to what President Biden said in Israel this week.
But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes.
Given the goal of not just defeating Hamas, but a long-term goal of Israel living in peace, of a two-state solution, if that's even a serious proposition anymore, what lessons do you think we have learned as a country that we could tell Israel, that we could share with Israel?
Well, look, I think probably the biggest mistake that we made post 9/11 was President Biden's decision to withdraw from Afghanistan the way that he did. I think the biggest lesson that we've learned, and frankly, after 9/11, the fact that the steps we took for over 20 years now have prevented another mass casualty terrorist attack at the hands of Islamic terrorists is something that we all ought to be very clear about, and we ought to remember. The lesson that we've learned and the lesson that we need to apply here is, first of all, these conflicts are connected. Iran absolutely is behind what's happening with respect to Hamas, with respect to Hezbollah. Some of the Hamas terrorists, they found Iranian munitions, North Korean munitions in their kit. The Hamas leadership itself has talked about their ties and relationship with Russia. We've got an ally, we've got adversaries arrayed against us who only understand strength, who only understand that weakness to them, frankly, is provocative. And if they think that we're weak, if they think that we're going to lose our resolve, they will in fact be strengthened. So the lesson that we need to learn here is Iran needs to recognize if they do come in, then they will face very severe consequences from Israel, from us. But the forces of freedom are at war with the forces of tyranny and terrorism around the world, and America has got to lead. I thought that part of President Biden's speech from the Oval Office was good. I think that those themes of the indispensable nature of America and America's leadership in the battle for freedom globally. That's exactly right, exactly what we need to be saying. The administration needs to make some fundamental changes with respect to their Iran policy. We saw just last week, for example, the sanctions preventing Iran from exporting missile technology lapsed. Those are gone now.
They expired.
And the administration, didn't take any steps to stop that. We need to do a better job. We need to actually enforce the sanctions with respect to Iran's oil exports. We got to put the Houthis back on the terrorist list. So there are a whole range of things we need to do. And in my view, the lesson from the post 9/11 era is that American strength is what matters, what's going to keep us safe. And Israeli strength is something that we ought to be supporting and advocating for.
The attack was on October 7th, a Saturday. I think it was Wednesday that Donald Trump gave a speech in which he insulted Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister.
So, yeah, there's Jake Tapper's questioning of Liz Cheney that was not really much better than what you saw from Margaret Brennan. I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip anyway, but that's the final newsmaker clip I wanted to show you. I do appreciate all of you who showed up for the live program, and I will be back next Monday and every Monday all the way through January 2025 when I guess on January 6, 2025, we'll find out if we have the peaceful transfer of power or continuation of power to the Biden administration, second term, or who knows what's going to happen. But I will keep covering it every Monday using the Sunday morning news analysis shows to take my clips from and add my political commentary and media criticism. I hope you appreciated all the time and effort I put into creating this program. It takes me maybe 8 or 10 hours every week to put this together. So let me know if you enjoyed it. You can give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, give me a supportive comment right under the video. There are a couple ways to support the program financially. Oh, and every now and then I upload other videos, not the Monday Media Mix-Ups. This week I actually, here for the live viewers, I just put a link in the live comments right after I'm done here. You can go watch the video I made last Friday showing that on August 28th, I made a correct prediction about what would happen with Trump's co-defendants in Georgia, that they were going to flip on him. Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro both flipped on him, and somehow it was a surprise on Fox News to one of the hosts of Outnumbered and Harvard Law School graduate Kayleigh McEnany. Even though she's a Harvard Law School graduate, apparently she can't understand what's going to happen in a criminal trial as well as I did when I predicted what would happen back on August 28th. So watch that video, and if something else like that happens, if I have some other reason to make a video in the next week, hopefully that could happen, and I'll upload it, and you can watch that too. But otherwise, I'll be back next Monday and every Monday through January 2025 for my Monday Media Mix-Ups. And so until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.